Hey everyone, I am so excited to have this conversation today. So, who we have with us is Megan Steckly, and she is the CEO of Comp-U-Dopt. And so, you guys are going to get to hear all about what her organization is, what it does, who they serve. And I just think this is a really appropriate time for this conversation. So, Megan, thanks so much for chatting with me this morning.
Thank you. It's so my pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Awesome. So why don't you just share a little bit about yourself, like who you are, where you're from, what do you do now, how you got to this point? Just give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Colorado, born and raised, and I've lived sort of all over the place, right? I When I graduated high school, I moved to LA for a couple of years and was going to go into film school, and then decided a fallback plan would be a good idea from there, and I moved to Canada because I'm half Canadian, and I did neuroscience for a little while and had 5 minors in crazy things because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And then I moved to Australia, which is where I first got introduced to the world of nonprofit. And I worked for the Queensland Symphony Orchestra there, doing their corporate relationship management and, and fundraising. But the best part about that job was building these really cool educational programs and projects that we got to take to rural and outback Queenslanders who, had never had the opportunity to really be introduced to classical music or really professional musicians quite at that caliber, and it sort of lit my fire for making sure that underserved, underrepresented, and historically under-resourced communities got to have access to all of these amazing things that we humans on the planet are capable of putting together. So after that, I moved to Tokyo for a couple of years. I lived in Japan as a headhunter, and that was a really great exercise in learning about kind of just how to run a company. And so when it was time to move back to the US and I joined Compudopt, I was ready to step into a leadership role, and it was just the perfect marriage of a business serving under-resourced community members, but also with this really cool, super elegant solution that's incredibly timely and relevant.
Okay, you are like world traveler. That's awesome that you've gotten to live in so many cool places. But I feel like in that, especially with the work that you do, it just probably gave you a really different glimpse into the bigger world around us. Just like you said, you experienced in Australia. So tell us a little bit about CompuDot and what their mission is.
Yeah. So Compudopt is a 501(c)(3). We're a national nonprofit. We've been around. This is our 15th year this year, which is exciting. And we really, we solve for digital equity, right? So our mission statement is to provide technology access and education for under-resourced youth and their communities. And we do that through a variety of programs. And, the problem that we're solving is probably more commercially known as the digital divide, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the digital divide itself is made up of typically three legs of the stool. We believe that there's a fourth there, which I'll come back and touch on in a minute here. But essentially, it's making sure that people have access to the technology tools that they need, so like computers, etc., that they are able to connect to the internet and access that the wealth of content and knowledge that's otherwise beyond reach when you don't have connectivity. And then of course digital literacy
Mm.
as well. So if you have the tools, you need to be able to know how to use them and leverage them to access what you really want. The fourth leg that we believe needs to be added in there is really technology-centered enrichment education, and talking about how technical skills and digital literacy apply way beyond just the use of a computer, right? Like, I'm sure everybody listening has a job that requires them to know how to use technical skills, right? We've got engineers and architects and you know, software programmers, et cetera, marketing staff, everybody uses technology. And so we really believe that, going that one step further is how we actually get to a space where we're talking about digital equity
Mm.
and making sure that, kids and families and community members are getting this complete, well-rounded picture of how technology needs to be incorporated and can be applied to help them lift themselves up and create better economic mobility, particularly in these under-resourced communities.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of the term digital divide until the lockdown happened, right? So everyone, I'm a mom, so schools went home, right? Home-based schooling for however long. It was different for everybody, but it was then that I started hearing this concept of a digital divide. And the more I dug into it, I realized, oh my goodness, there are communities and populations of families and kids, just like you're talking about, that didn't have something as simple as access to internet to even do at home schooling, right? And so in the time that you've been at Compudot and just like the work that you do, can you talk about specifically, you guys made a post the other day and you talked about Black and brown communities specifically. So can you speak a little bit to why you feel like it's these communities that are being impacted the most when it comes to this digital divide?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Black and brown communities, as we already know, right, have historically been under-resourced. And, there's been a number of studies that have been done recently. We know that overall 40%, 41% actually, of low-income households lack access to a computer at home as well as
Mm,
connectivity. But I think, when you dig into the data a little bit further, one of the things that's really shocking is that Black households are 50% more likely than white households to live in areas that are with limited broadband services. And what
mhm.
that really means is that like the whole of the community that they're living in actually has, less infrastructure even put into the community to be able to leverage that as a resource, even if it was, available for them to access, right? Um, and that alone precludes these families from being able to really truly um, be responsive and reach all of the tools and everything that is online. I mean, everything is online, right? We're talking about telehealth and
Yeah,
medical consultations now are online. It's even more than just distance learning, right?
right.
And yeah, and so these, when we look at the device access side, because that's obviously the connectivity piece, when we look at the device access side, Black and brown communities are 12 to 18% more likely not to have the technology that they need in their homes, right?
Mm,
So many families may have smartphones, and in fact, Black households are some of the earliest adopters of mobile
mm,
technology, and a lot of that comes from the fact that they're under resourced when it comes to greater infrastructure within their communities. And so they've, adapted into having to be early adopters of mobile technology, which is on one hand kind of great, right? And
right,
leading
right.
from the front, right? But on the other hand, if we're going to talk about equity, we need infrastructure to be equitable, right?
Yeah, right. And because someday life goes around computers, right? As these kids
Yeah.
grow up and they get into later high school, if they go to college, even if they don't go to college or these jobs, they need to know how to use other things besides the mobile technology, right? So that kind of leads me into how are you guys at Compudot helping solve this specific problem?
Yeah. Um, so I think that our solution is really quite simple and kind of elegant, right? So, we take, from the device access perspective, we take computers from companies getting rid of old technologies and we refurbish those, we wipe them, and then we, clean them up and get them back out into the households of community members who don't have their own computer at home, right? So school-based devices don't count because we know those are content restricted. We want them to have their own computer just like they went to Best Buy.
Mhm.
Um, and we hand out about 20,000 computers a year through that particular program and growing, right? The demand is always higher than what we're serving at the moment. And then from a connectivity perspective, we have two approaches. One is that first of all, we're responsive to the locality that we're in. If there are free and low cost internet solutions that the city or the county or whatever is providing to those households, we make sure that that's included in the offering and that families know how to connect to that.
Mm,
Otherwise, we refer them to everyoneon.org, which also is kind of an aggregator for free low cost connectivity solutions that are aligned to families' neighborhoods and their public subsidies they may qualify for. But what we're most excited about and that we just announced a couple of weeks ago is that we are piloting our very own fire wireless mesh network that will provide high-speed internet access for at least 10,000 households in the city of Dallas, and then
wow.
replicated to 4 other cities across the United States. We'll launch all 5 of those cities this year, which is
Wow,
amazing.
that's incredible. That's
Yes.
exciting.
Yeah, so we're super excited. So that'll be free, minimum 50 megabit per second download speed for the households in those communities. And we really have a vision that this will be sustained and hopefully become sort of almost community owned
Mm,
in a way, so that it is, a long-term solution for that. And then finally, of course, anyone who gets our computers has access to free digital literacy programming that we provide in person or self-paced or through webinars. And in all the communities, the 23 cities that we work in and 15 states right now, we're also delivering technology centered enrichment education for elementary through high school and opportunity youth that's
mm.
aligned towards workforce and really helps put, this full equity solution on a platform so that these families and our participants can really, move forward and participate in the economic mainstream.
That's incredible. And as we get ready to wrap this conversation up, Megan's going to share just some ways that if you're listening, you want to be part of this movement and be part of the great work that Comp-U-Dopt is doing, or even figure out what you can do in your own local communities to help bridge this digital divide. But I was thinking as we were going into this conversation, we live in a time where we are more connected than ever, right? Like devices, technology has literally become like the blueprint for life. But yet, there is population after population of people. There are groups and there's communities full of people who still are disconnected more than ever. They're still lacking access and they're still lacking the resources that they need to actually thrive and succeed in this world. As we think about these kids, especially, right? Knowing what their future looks like from a life, from a work standpoint, this is the time to make an impact in their lives now so that we set them up and their families for success down the road. So, thank you so much for having this conversation. I think it brought light to a lot of things that I think some of us probably know are existing back here, but didn't know some of those like really specific statistics that really show the world that we're living in right now. So, again, so how can people get involved? How can they help Compudot specifically, or what can they do in their local communities to help solve this issue?
Yeah, and thank you, Kenneth. I really appreciate that. Conversations like this and companies like yours are really playing a critical role in helping us reach individuals across the globe, really, and share more information about this issue. And that's one way that people can really get involved and help. And I know it seems simple to just have a conversation, but building awareness is
Yeah, of
I mean, it's the first step on so many levels. And of course, as a nonprofit, we accept philanthropy, right? You can make a gift
course.
24 hours a day, 365, and that's really meaningful too. Of course, that enables us to serve more families, more households. If a monetary donation is not within the scope of what you feel you can contribute at the moment, right? Talking to your IT guys about
Mhm.
what happens with your computers at your companies or your husband or wife's company or whatever, and suggesting that maybe they reach out to us and donate those computers to us so that we can give them a second life and keep
Mm,
them out of landfills. That's another huge way to support us. And then, of course, just being connected through social media and again sharing the message about how important this issue really is, and just how incredibly solvable it, a problem it is. Right?
mhm.
We can close the gap. This is one of those businesses that I hope we're putting ourselves out of business because it really is just so
Yeah.
solvable. And but thank you again for letting me speak to everybody this morning and be a part of this, and for your support and championship of these critical issues and making change in our communities.
Thank you so much. And we will make sure to link all the information that you need to reach out to Compudot, including their website and their social media handles, so that you can know exactly where to go directly if you're ready to jump in.